Welcome to Rewritten, the podcast where we venture into the uncharted waters of mindset, body image, confidence, and all the shit life throws at you in between. We're here to bring the unfiltered stories, unexplored mindsets, and of course, a little bit of fun along the way. I am Georgie, and I am your host and founder of Rewritten. I'm so excited, guys, to bring one of my good friends, Ange, who is a psychologist, and she has also done the Rewrite You course, and throughout that we had some of the juiciest of conversations. And I'm so excited to bring you here for everyone from Rewritten to hear from today, because something that we definitely saw throughout the Rewrite You course is the effect on body image and intimacy, and how this topic is really just not spoken about at all, and how many women are really struggling with this and they're feeling it, but they're not talking about it. They're not talking about it with their partners. They're not talking about it with their friends. And body image has a huge effect on intimacy. But I really am so grateful to bring you here today, because you are a psychologist. You have such a broad knowledge on all of this. And I think it's going to be really important to talk about intimacy in general, being more than just sex, but also to go in depth with the stats that are currently out there, and also our experiences that we've gone through with it as well. So welcome, and thank you so much for jumping on here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm genuinely excited to be here and grateful that you've invited me. And, you know, by no means do I consider myself an expert on this topic, but certainly have a lot of personal experience and resonate with a lot of what you've just said of people not talking about this. I know certainly through my 20s and 30s, these were not conversations that I was having with anybody, but that was certainly like my body image and the interplay of that into intimacy was a really significant thing for me. And also being a psychologist, obviously, I see this crop up a lot with clients as well.
So do we want to touch on first, to really get into it, about what intimacy really is? Because a lot of people think intimacy is sex, when really there is so much more to it than that. So do you want to describe to what your knowledge is around what intimacy really is?
Sure. Well, hopefully my answer is comprehensive enough, but I think I find intimacy in a lot of different ways with different people. But when it comes to partners, I think there's, you know, the emotional connection that we experience with our partner, that sense of real togetherness, and that can come through, I guess, just the day-to-day of life, and having kind and gentle, respectful conversations with each other, feeling that flow in life together. I think it comes from shared experiences. I think it comes through laughter. If I think about our core emotional needs as human beings, probably intimacy needs to play into our sense of who we are, our sense of identity and separateness from someone, as much as our sense of togetherness with that person, our sense of bonding with another human being, our sense of being attached in a secure way, our sense of separateness and you know, where we finish and where they begin, so that we know that there's a bit of a difference and we can connect on that level with another person, as well as, like I said, like playfulness and spontaneity. All of those kind of core emotional needs form part of intimacy. Obviously, as well, a part of that, or one way that we can be intimate, is through our sexual relationship. Not all couples can do that for different reasons, but that is a part of intimacy rather than just intimacy itself.
Yeah, I love that. And we're going to talk deeply into the effects of body image and intimacy, because I know I have gone through it in my past relationships. Obviously, I've struggled with body image for a really long time, and I think a lot of my struggles came from trying to please somebody else and trying to, I guess, look a certain way to fit ideals, society's, you know, perfect body. Let's touch on some stats that are out there at the moment, because I think that's really eye-opening as to how many people are actually struggling with body image and intimacy. So what are some stats that we can share? Some both. I know you have some, I've got some here too. What are some stats for you that really stood out when it comes to the effects of body image and intimacy?
So I guess if we start looking at young people, the Butterfly Foundation, who does a lot of work in the space of eating disorders do quite a bit of research, and their research is, they have a solid sample size. They're not interviewing 30 people. We're talking sort of 17 to 1,800 data points, which is a pretty significant amount of information. I think it was 2021, their last lot of information came out about body image in young people, so age 12 through to 18. 90% of that sample size were concerned with their body image, which is just like, it's a massive statistic. But on top of that, 50% of that sample size never speak positively to themselves about their body.
That is wild.
Obviously, we're not talking about intimacy in relation to that, but that does kind of set the tone for what people are struggling with, because those, body image struggles are not going away when they're 18. They're carrying that through into adulthood and into their adult sort of relationships. And even some of the stats that I noticed that the Butterfly Foundation put out were around how this even impacts education for them. So half of that sample, 50% of them, had not put up their that's in class to ask a question about something because of their body image concerns. That gives you, I guess, an idea of how significant the impact can be in so many different areas of body image on how we function in day-to-day life.
Yeah. Another one that I found as well was that over 70% of Aussie kids say that their body image stops them from going to the beach. And that's kids. And as we're saying, they're getting experience to those body image struggles from an early age. And then that goes on into adulthood. And for a lot of us, we don't have the vulnerability to talk about it. And that was something that I definitely experienced when I was going through this. I just thought it was something that everybody kind of went through, which the stats kind of show that. But I never wanted to talk about it with someone because I was scared. And so when you go into those relationships, I know in my past relationship, I didn't ever really talk about it. And sometimes that I would get shut down. So there was the body image side of it that I really struggled to talk about. But then as it started to affect intimacy in itself, I feel like was even harder to talk about. And I tried a couple times bringing it up in conversations, and a few times very much felt shut down. And because I was younger, I just thought, okay, this is something not to get spoken about at all.
But what we do know when we look at the research is that a decrease in body image is correlated with a decrease in things like sexual self-efficacy. So your feeling of being competent, sexually, it's associated, lower body image is also associated with a lower rate of self-advocacy. So exactly what you're talking about, like wanting to speak up, wanting to advocate for yourself in terms of sexuality. It's associated with a decrease in sexual satisfaction. It's associated with a decrease in sexual health and sexual function and your experience of sex itself. So your sort of sexual well-being would round out those factors. Your well-being overall sexually relates to, do you have function? Are you able to engage sexually? If you do engage, what is your experience of that engagement like? Is it pleasurable? Is it frightening? Is it increasing your self-consciousness, and is it having playing out negatively in your life? And then the third area in terms of sexual well-being is around, are you healthy in terms of your sexual behaviour? And I think, I know for me as a young woman with my body image struggles, that played out in terms of the types of partners that I chose. It played out in terms of me not actually really loving my body enough to treat it in a healthy way in general, but also that played out sexually as well, like unprotected sex.
Yeah.
That type of thing. We know that those rates are higher amongst people who have difficulties with their body image.
What type of guys would you go for when you were struggling with that?
So I guess I didn't seek out a lot of male attention. Firstly, I didn't feel worthy of it. So, when I was a young woman, I just assumed that people would find me pretty repulsive. And so I didn't seek out a lot of male attention. And I think that, I mean, there's a whole lot of complex factors that were playing into that for me, not just body image. But in terms of body image, that was a big factor. And so in some ways I was protected from really overt poor sexual well-being because I wasn't engaging a lot in sexual activity when I was younger. But when I did, it was often, I guess, kind of an idea that formed in my head was like, well, if someone's interested in me, that's as good as it's going to get for me. Like there wasn't any idea in my mind that I had value, that I could wait for a partner who suited me. And so I think what that meant was I was very unassertive when it came to my sex life. And when I say sex life, I'm talking like there were just like a couple of guys that were around. It wasn't like I had a great deal of experience. But what that lack of assertiveness did mean was that when predators came across my path, I was vulnerable to that. I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't know how to defend myself in the face of a predator. And I also had very low self-esteem and very low self-worth. And so a lot of the signals around that were very confusing.
100%. And I think from such a young age, as women, we get so conditioned to believe that we have to look a certain way to please our potential partner. And so therefore we think that we have to change for that rather than having the confidence in ourselves to be like, no, we're actually great in who we are and we can attract a partner based on that. I know from a very young age, I was very aware of that. And pretty much my whole body image struggles were based around trying to change myself and how I look to find love and for other people to find me attractive, which all linked in, which also gave me not as much confidence when it came to intimacy itself.
Well, it sounds like part of what you were struggling with there was objectifying yourself, viewing yourself purely as an object of sexual pleasure or for how you looked rather than the ability to see a really well-rounded view of yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying, but also I feel like that's all we see when we're younger and all we know. Like who was there to tell us and to teach us like what relationships should be like when we're seen in the movies? It's always the pretty girl that gets the guy. It's always the pretty girl that they want. And even they would see like you'd see in movies and even just schoolyard chat. I know for me, a lot of that, I would witness guys comment on other girls being like, oh, they're so hot. It was all about appearance. It was all about how they looked, and that's what made people attractive. Yeah.
I mean, you said before that it was hard for you to talk to your previous partner about sex and intimacy. Has that changed for you now with an increase in your body image? What's different around that for you now?
I brought a lot of that shit from that past relationship into my current relationship with Alex. But because I felt like I had been shut down with those types of conversations in the past, I was absolutely terrified to ever have those conversations with Alex. But he was really one of the first people that opened my eyes to the fact that my relationship with food was so unhealthy. And we met at a time that I was in a lot smaller body and I was like right in the thick of diet culture world. And as soon as he started picking up, like saying stuff to me like, your relationship with food is actually quite cooked. Do you realize that? It then started making me reflect on the situation that I was in and maybe, shit, I haven't actually properly dealt with all of this. Like, yes, I've lost weight. I got into a smaller body, but I'm actually more terrified of stopping dieting and my body changing than ever before. And from that, it kind of opened a can of worms for me because I still didn't want to admit it. I was stuck in that diet culture world still. It was my career. It was my whole being. It was my whole identity. And then I realized probably that I had to have more conversations with Alex about this in terms of this is something that I do really struggle with. And those conversations, and we'll talk more about this in the podcast that we're going to do next as well, and in terms of more so talking about the effects of pornography with intimacy and the effects of body image with that. But there were moments that I was absolutely terrified to show any vulnerability around that at all. Because in the past, I was with someone who, you know, was with me as my body started to get bigger. Mm. And then as soon as my body started to get bigger, his friends, I heard, were calling me a whale behind closed doors. And that got back to me. And then suddenly our dynamic in the relationship started to change and I could feel a shift. And then suddenly he wanted to break up with me. And I knew my body had changed a lot in that time. And so I took those comments, I took the struggles that I had, I took what I've been, you know, conditioned to believe from society, and I was like, I've got to lose weight. And then I lost all this weight. And next minute, I was like, the forbidden fruit again. And he was like, I want you back. And in my head, I was like, this just validates everything, that unless I look a certain way, I'm never actually going to be good enough. And I stupidly fucking took him back because my self-worth was at an all-time low. So then fast forward to the relationship that I have with Alex, all my body image struggles started to come to the surface. And then I knew I had to get help on the situation. I knew I had to stop dieting. I knew I had to mend my relationship with my body and then food. And I knew my body was going to change. I knew I wasn't going to stay the same size 8, 10 girl that I was. And I was terrified that if my body changed, he was going to leave me. And that was the hardest part because my body did start to change. And then I started to feel, you know, there were a couple of comments made that we'll talk about in the next episode as well. But then I had to have such deep and vulnerable conversations to be like, a lot of my body image struggles come from relationships and wanting to feel loved and valued. And I'm terrified that if I change, you're going to leave.
And so how did that play out in real terms for you in terms of your sex life? Like, what was that like for you then, trying to be intimate, if that's how you were feeling? I imagine that's pretty...
I pulled back.
Yeah.
I was too scared. Also, I, from past relationships, had been shut down so much that I wouldn't initiate. And so it got to the point with Alex that I wasn't initiating, and he was like, why are you not initiating? And that, once again, that topic terrified me. And I had to say to him, I've been rejected so many times in the past that I've just stopped ever trying because I just don't want to experience that again.
It's such a painful experience, rejection, isn't it?
So painful.
In whatever form it takes, whether it's, you know, just a more broad social rejection or sexual rejection, it's pretty painful for us as humans.
Yeah, and to show that side too to Alex, because I think when we met, I put on such a good persona of being confident, right? Like I had like a mask on. And so to then explain to him, I'm actually not confident. I'm actually terrified. I'm actually really fucking struggling with this stuff, and I'm terrified that I'm going to lose you if I show you any sort of vulnerability whatsoever. And in that moment, there were many moments around our journey of when I was struggling with the body image issues that I thought he was going to leave. And the best thing that honestly, I love that guy more than freaking anything. He sat me down and looked at me in my eye and was like, George, if you ever initiate, I'm never going to reject you. And in that moment, it almost felt like this massive release. And in that moment, I think I probably realized that that was the first time that I have ever felt safe in a relationship and ever felt accepted in a relationship. And it wasn't until I got that feeling that I realized that in my past relationships, I never, ever felt safe, ever. based on I never had that confidence in myself to think that they would just accept me for me.
It's pretty powerful.
Yay
for Alex.
Yay for Alex. Love him. Have you, well, I guess we kind of touched on this before, but in terms of your struggles with body image and intimacy, you're obviously in a very loving, beautiful relationship now.
I am.
But you have also come from a past of really struggling with a lot of this.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me more about your mindset around it in the past compared to your mindset around it now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I just look at my relationship now with Adrian, my husband, it has evolved and changed over the years as I've learned to firstly love myself, which I'll share in a minute about how that's impacted initiation, because you brought up initiating sex. But it's also evolved with me learning good language and both of us learning together, how do we actually talk about this and how do we communicate about this? Because I guess, there are a few touch points in terms of body image that were occurring for me in our relationship. One was I wasn't really present. So what was happening for me is we would be intimate and the entire time, basically, I would be thinking about, oh my gosh, like my boobs are moving too much. my oh my gosh, like, is there a fat roll there? Like, that must be so gross for him. I'm taking too long to orgasm. I can't orgasm. Like, it just would go on. It would just be this relentless kind of voice in my head.
That you couldn't even enjoy the moment because you were just so in your head.
I couldn't enjoy it. And also I wouldn't initiate sex because for me, him initiating sex with me really validated that I was attractive and that he wanted me, which is a pretty unfair thing to put on him to be the one who initiates all of our sexual activity. And then if he was tired or stressed or overworked and wasn't initiating, I would be miserable. I'd be like, that's because I'm a gross fat cow. Right? Like these are the kinds of things we say in our heads. And so I think as I have really made a commitment to work on this for myself, what has changed in that regard is that I can initiate sex with him. That's great. If he is not feeling like it, that's also fine. And it doesn't have this massive effect on my self-esteem. And I think the other is understanding that if you don't enjoy something, your desire for that thing will be pretty much non-existent.
Yeah.
And so for me, learning to find sex pleasurable and kind of retraining myself to be in my body and enjoy those feelings and that for me started way before we would have sex. I would have to be thinking about it in a positive way instead of thinking, oh my God, he's going to see my body and like just all of these anxieties in the lead up to sex, let alone the anxieties that occurred during sex. So I think what's changed for me in part is that I actually just actively train my brain now to think about how much I'm looking forward to that. That'll be really lovely. I'm going to enjoy that. And then training myself to be mindful in the moment, to experience him and the physical aspects of what's happening and to be intimate and connected with him rather than to let my mind wander into all of those other, kind of doorways that it could go down.
It's really controlling that negative voice, hey, and having an understanding where it comes from, but also understanding that once, as you said, you can activate a different one to focus on something else.
Yeah.
But it's the whole initiating thing, going back to that. When Alex made that comment to say that you can initiate and I'll never reject you. And because I know so many of like my clients, and you've probably experienced this too, will talk about this situation and then you try and find the confidence to then initiate and go for it. I remember so many times that I was lying there in bed being like, I really want to have sex right now, but I would need to initiate and I'm fucking terrified.
Well, so it's interesting because one of the things I was terrified of was that Adrian would have sex with me out of obligation, which was just like a horrible thought that he was just, okay, like I don't want to upset her. And
I'll do it if I have to.
Well, if I have to, I'll do it.
I could not imagine him ever being like that.
He's not like that
He's
at
the
all.
softest soul for you guys that don't know him. Like,
Yeah, he's a divine human and he's also very well grounded in himself. So he respects himself enough that he would never have sex with someone out of obligation to them, right? Like he has that level of self-respect. Whereas I had not had that level of self-respect.
Yeah.
You know, like the first guy I had sex with because I didn't want to say no to him.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, he did not sexually assault me because I willingly did it.
Yeah.
But I didn't willingly do it. If that makes any sense. Like,
totally.
I did not want to have sex with him. He didn't know that, poor guy. But I did it because I just didn't know how to say no. And also I was like, well, you know, I guess a part of me was feeling validated as well.
That's an interesting point because I know that there was a time in my journey in between partners that I just wanted to find that validation because I wasn't getting it in a past relationship, that I just turned into a little slapper for a little while. And because I wanted that experience, I wanted that feeling of wanting to be wanted because I couldn't validate myself at that time. I felt like I needed that validation from men. And I've seen other women go through that as well, other clients who will just go and sleep with lots of different guys, not feeling like they want to, not even caring if they speak to them again, but because they've been lacking that somewhere else in their life and that's their only way that they're seeking that validation.
Scary.
It is scary.
Yeah.
It is scary. But this is where it comes down to finding that confidence within to know that you are worthy and to know that you do deserve to have great intimate relationships. And that intimacy isn't just sex. And I think another important thing to talk about here is how normal it is to have breaks from sex in relationships, and that just because you might be having a break from sex, or maybe it hasn't happened as often as you like because we go through seasons of life, whether that's you working through your own stuff, your partner working through their own stuff, whether it's babies, whether it's grief, whether it's stress, a whole variety of different things. It's totally normal to have breaks from it, but not to feel like that's the end of the relationship, because you can have intimacy in so many other ways. And that's something that Alex and I went through a phase of not doing it as often, and that freaked me out at times because I was like, oh my God, it's because my body's changed. Is it me? Is it like him? What's going on here? I'm freaking out because that's what I had experienced before. But then at the same time, our whole relationship, I just could not fault. I didn't question if he loved me or not. I knew that he loved me because we experienced intimacy in so many other ways, whether that's cuddling each other on the couch and watching TV, or having really deep conversations about life and sharing emotions with each other and sharing that vulnerability. Like sometimes those deeper conversations, I have felt more intimate with him than any sexual experience I've had. And I think that's important for people to understand, that a relationship intimacy isn't just sex. There are so many other avenues that you can go through for that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the challenges with that, Georgie, is if you have two couples in a relationship who have expectations about what their sex life should look like, and it doesn't look that way, and they're both feeling insecure about that, then the intimate conversations that you're talking about outside of sex may be even much harder to have because everyone's feeling really quite insecure and unsteady. And so, I know for me, one thing that's helped me with that is really understanding what the research and data says about our sexual desire. And we talk about sex drive a lot, and sex is not a drive. Like food is a drive. We have to eat to survive, sleep is a drive. We have to have sleep, but sex is something that we desire, and that can wax and wane, our sexual desire. And one of the challenges that I see with a lot of clients around this is they start a relationship. There's this intense what we would call spontaneous desire between the couple, where
the honeymoon phase.
There's a lot of lust, there's a lot of desire, there's a lot of hot sex going on. And that's really normal. But for certainly the majority of women, once that, we call that sort of a limerence period, it's usually about 2 years in a relationship where that intensity lasts.
Interesting, 2 years, the honeymoon phase.
Yeah, I mean, not obviously we're talking, there can be outliers to that. It can finish a lot sooner or go for a lot longer. But in general, it's around 2 years. And then what settles in is our kind of more normal, our personal level of desire. And that desire can be spontaneous or it can be responsive. So spontaneous is that more kind of like, I'm just thinking about you and,
want to bang you.
I want to bang
jump
you.
on you.
Yep. Or there's responsive desire, which is when the context is right and when I'm experiencing pleasure, my desire then follows. I respond to that desire.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the struggles that I see with a lot of people around this is they don't understand that they may need to create environments in their relationship or in their own mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about what I was saying before about low self-esteem and low body image, that is not creating an environment for me, which is going to create pleasure, and therefore desire can then follow that pleasure. Does that
Makes total sense. How can you want to jump someone when you're in your head talking absolute shit to yourself, and then you have a physiological response of that, of negative emotions that come into play? It's impossible.
Yeah, you just might lie back and take it.
Yeah.
And so, I think understanding the importance of pleasure is a really key aspect to this. If people are having intimacy difficulties, thinking about, do you actually create an environment for yourself inside your own mind and in your physical environment where there is pleasure occurring? Because everybody has what we would call sexual brakes and sexual accelerators.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, for me, if I'm going to have sex, there are not going to be baskets of washing in my bedroom, because that is a...
Is that not a turn on for you?
That is not a turn on for me. That is a break, because what that does is it reminds me that I have shit to get done.
Yeah.
And I'm a doer.
Yeah.
And so learning and understanding that you have a set of brakes and accelerators in terms of what is going to propel you towards pleasure and therefore responsive desire. And understanding that those brakes and accelerators have different levels of sensitivity. So your partner... And this is, I think often how women might describe their partner, really sensitive accelerator, like has a Ferrari accelerator. He's ready to go.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much.
I feel like for guys as well, women definitely need to be in more of like an emotional state, I feel. Whereas for guys, it's like, as you just said, they can just turn it on. And sometimes they feel like the guy wants to jump them before even any foreplay, and the girl's like, hang on a minute, I need some warming up here.
Well, and that's part of like understanding what creates a pleasurable context. So the context, of the sex is important. I mean, I think there are a lot of guys who do seek out intimacy and emotional connection through sex and sexual contact. And there also are a lot of guys who have sluggish accelerators, like they're not going to be as interested as quickly, and understanding what factors play into that. Sleep, stress, like all sorts of things can play into how active or how sensitive our accelerators are. But then you've got brakes as well. So think about like what is going to slam the brakes on for you. Like I said, for me, like washing baskets, they're a brake, but also me engaging in intimacy with my husband and thinking the whole time about how gross my body is, that's a break. Like that is going to slam on the brakes for me, having an environment where I'm going to experience pleasure, which I know is a little bit of a repetition of what I've already said, but I think for us, for Adrian and I, being able to have those conversations around brakes and accelerators. What's an accelerator for you? Like, I like music. I don't like dead sound. like
time of day also, that can be another
time
big
of day
thing.
is massive. So
Yeah.
one other thing that for us, has really changed things is we schedule a lot of sex.
Yeah.
We don't leave it to happen.
You got to
because it's really important for us. And by that I mean everyone has a different idea of how many times is a good amount of time to be having sex, and I think that has to be negotiated with each couple. There's no right or wrong with that. But it is an important part for us of connecting because we're both busy, we're both active. If we just let that go and expect that spontaneous desire will be the thing that carries us through, we won't have sex for a long time.
Yeah.
Because we will hit the bed, we're both exhausted,
Can't be bothered.
time of day. I do not like sex in the morning. I don't want to kiss your feral mouth in the morning. Thanks very much. No, thank you. Right? So understanding all of that and having gentle and loving, non-accusatory conversations around it, we know that good, healthy communication about sex increases sexual satisfaction in couples. So when we look at the data on that, couples who kind of openly admit that they don't have good conversations, only 9% of those couples also say that they have sexual satisfaction.
Yeah, that's wild. That's actually wild.
If you're not communicating about sex in a healthy way, in a way that's safe and kind and that uses language like brakes and accelerators and pleasure and context and understanding that there is responsive desire and there's spontaneous desire, and the likelihood is, if we look at stats around spontaneous desire and responsive desire, 85% of women operate on responsive desire.
Yeah, wow.
25% of men operate on responsive desire.
That makes so much sense.
In other words, 75% of men operate on spontaneous desire. And so if you have a real mismatch in terms of how that works, then you're going to have one partner who may, if they don't understand this stuff, feel like their needs are not being met. And I think also there's a lot of fallacy around this idea that limerence effect, that first 2 years, is how your relationship should be forever. And I hear a lot of people who come out of that stage who think that they're not in love anymore.
Yeah, and then move on to the next relationship and then suddenly they've got a high turnover.
Yeah, same thing happens.
Yeah.
And so I think when we have good language, we understand how all of this works at a biological, scientific kind of level.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of the pressure off.
Yeah. I think so. I think all of this, it really comes back to, and I know I see this with a lot of my clients, is that they want to have those conversations with their partner about this and they want to feel safe. And I know I definitely experienced this myself too. But when you struggle with body image issues and confidence, to have those conversations is really fucking hard.
It's really hard. And I think that that's where we can use science to step in. And so I talk with clients about this a lot. They may want to talk with their partner and they don't know how to open up the conversation. And so we talk about, what's a good way for that to happen? And, if you go to your partner and say, I learned something really interesting about sex today, they are going to want to hear that.
Yeah.
And you can separate it out from yourself and your own issues, and then you can gently work into what it is like for you and what your particular issues are, But I think having those broader kind of safe conversations first that are a bit away from the personal issues can help.
Yeah, peel back the onion slowly.
Yeah. And because I think this is, like you said, it's so tied into our self-esteem. It's so tied into fear. It's so tied into all of those really difficult emotions which are going to set off your fight, flight, freeze response, which automatically straight away makes it much harder to have communication.
Totally.
You're going to be, unknowing, perhaps not even realize that the faculties that you need in your frontal lobe are shutting down because you're in that state. So, yeah, I think just starting with those really broad, curious, gentle conversations that don't go into the specific details about your own sex life, but just start throwing out there a bit of language. I've heard this thing about brakes and accelerators today.
Yeah, and easy. That's something that's I've definitely found helpful as I was going through this with Alex, from going from that stage of being absolutely terrified to now we talk about it so openly, and it's great and playful and intimate, all of that. But I had to kind of push through that fear at the beginning, and I had to not bring my past shit into the relationship. And I always say to my clients, just start any new relationship with 100% trust that you can be you and it can only get lost from there, right? Don't come in from a past relationship where you have like 50% trust left over and start your next relationship at 50% trust and build up from that. You always want to start from 100. And so in my head, even though I was terrified to have these conversations and I was terrified to be vulnerable, I would always constantly remind myself, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. And I would repeat that. And even though I felt like my sphincter was tightening and I would get nervous sweats and I'd be like, fuck, I have to talk about this, I would trust that if Alex was my right partner, it would all be okay in the end. And what I found was the hardest conversations I have had there have actually been the best and have made me feel closer to him and safer than I have ever felt before. So I think for a lot of women listening to this, and even guys too, trust that if you are being vulnerable with someone, you are going to know from that conversation if they're the right person for you or not. And it might be tricky, but as long as you're both listening to each other and you can both learn the reasons why you both believe certain things, which was so important with Alex and I, because at stages I would take things personally when really it wasn't about me at all. It was about what he's gone through in his past, and I needed to understand that. And I think if you can start from having those conversations and build on that, and then as time goes on, you can have that level of trust and you can openly have those conversations without freaking out. I also know, though, for some of my clients, they're copying comments from their partner that their body is a problem.
Yeah.
And so what would you say if a client came to you? What would you say if their partner has been saying, I'm not attracted to you anymore, I don't want to have sex with you anymore because your body's changed? How would you respond to that?
Well, I guess the framework that I use in therapy, because I'm an individual therapist, I'm not a couples therapist, would be really about firstly validating that client's experience and, you know, obviously demonstrating deep empathy for how painful that is to hear. It's not my job to build that client's self-esteem or tell them how worthy they are. It's my job, I guess, to help facilitate them finding that out for themselves. And unfortunately, I do think a lot of self-esteem issues, whether it's body or just our general self-esteem, having low self-esteem may perhaps lead us to choose partners that we wouldn't necessarily choose for ourselves if we really loved ourselves. And so that's really difficult because for some people they've had children with those people, they may really love that partner, and they're in really, really difficult situations. So I think I have seen really good relationship therapists work with couples to turn even relationships where people are separated around, where there's been a lot of hurt and damage caused. If you're hearing that from a partner, your partner has some work to do, and negotiating with them what that looks like, whether that's their own personal private therapy that they get. I mean, obviously being a psychologist, I'm a big advocate for therapy.
Everyone should have therapy.
Everyone should have therapy. And a lot more therapists who are out there should have therapy.
Oh, totally.
Just saying
this is why I love you, because you did the Rewrite You course and you're a psych. And I
did the Rewrite You, but I also have my own therapist. You know, I've had the same therapist now for, I mean, God, she can't get rid of me. We are coming up for our 20-year anniversary, I think.
Yeah, amazing.
I really am committed to that aspect of my health. Even if I don't feel like I need to see her, I go see her and we philosophize about other stuff. But, you know, I think it's an important part of health. So there's a lot of people who are scared of that or think therapy is really, really intimidating.
I think in that moment, if a client came to me and said, my partner, I actually had this happen not long ago, so this is actually fresh for me. I had one of my clients who's been in a long-term relationship say, Georgie, my partner, is saying that he's not as attracted to me anymore, and it's making me feel like I need to go on a diet, and I feel like if I don't go on a diet, he's going to leave me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I've gone through similar things in the past. I'm like, okay, I know exactly how you're feeling right now. You feel absolutely terrified. You feel like you want to go on that diet, but I want to stop you for a second and make you just come back to yourself and come back to finding that inner confidence of knowing your worth. Now, I'm not saying go break up with him straight away, because there's a lot of things that guys are not educated on when it comes to this. Guys grow up in a world where they think that they've made it in life if they have a partner that looks like a trophy wife, whether that's been what they've seen in porn, whether it's been what they see, you know, in the media, conversations that they have with each other when boys are being boys. And for a lot of guys, they don't understand that. They don't understand that side of it and how that can affect women, and also how their mindsets can be like desensitized to certain things as well, which we definitely touch on in our next episode. And so I said to her, this is the perfect time for you to sit down and have a conversation with him about what does it mean to him? Like, what does he need in a relationship? How much does looks actually matter to him? You know, is it your looks? Is there something else deeper down? And it's the hardest conversation that you will have, but trust. And this is what I had to do with Alex at one stage. I literally had to, it terrified me. And then I had to kind of prep myself that I knew I was going to ask him all these questions, and I knew I may not like the response to them, but I had to have the confidence in myself to know that if there was something that he said that made me feel like, okay, no, he's just put my whole value in my body, I knew deep down that I would have to respect myself to leave.
Absolutely. And I guess, you know, one way of thinking about what you're saying is other people, and this is not just in relation to sex and attractiveness and your partner, but other people will abandon you in life for all sorts of reasons, and usually it's their own reasons.
Yeah.
But there is nothing in my experience worse than the feeling of abandoning yourself. Having done that on several occasions, the consequences of that in life are really, really heavy. And, you know, I'm aware that people listening will have a whole range of different relationships, and there may be people who are very close to the edge of leaving a toxic relationship, and that's, you know, that will be an incredibly tough and painful decision. On the other side of that, if you learn to do some of the stuff that we're talking about, to build your self-esteem, to love yourself, to love your life, and to love your body because your body gives you life.
And to communicate.
On the other side of that are people, whether they're romantic partners or not, who will really love you for who you are.
Totally. I could not agree with this any more.
And, you know, I mean, I've tried to have some of these conversations with Adrian about body image, and I just get frankly, I get kind of blank stares from him because he just doesn't, it's just not.
They don't get it. It's not that they don't get it, it's just.
It's not important.
They can't get into that, yeah.
Well, for him, I mean, he's quite a unique person, I have to say, but it just draws a blank for him because he doesn't view me in that objectified way. Mm-hmm. When he thinks about me, he sees me as my body and loves and I think I said this to you a few months ago, that I was thinking about what I love the most about him.
Yeah.
And I love his body because his body is the reason that he's here.
Yeah.
And that dawned on me then that he also loves my body as well. Which is
body not in an objective way, but body is like you as a being.
It houses who I am. And when he thinks about me, he doesn't objectify me as being she is this face and this body. Mm-hmm. It's all of who I am that he loves. And so when I start just talking about my body, he gets this kind of confused look on his face and says things to me like, you know that we're just monkeys spinning on a rock, right? Or, you know, it's just a meat suit or whatever he comes up with in his little sci-fi way that because it's not on his radar.
Yeah. I think that's so lucky for you to have experienced that though.
Well, it's not all luck. It's not all luck.
And you're so right, because this is where I can resonate with probably women who are listening to this thinking, and they might be in a shitty relationship at the moment thinking, I don't know what to do. I can resonate to that because I stayed in a relationship for a very long time thinking that that was normal. But until you can find that confidence in yourself, until you can understand and do the inner work, which I had to do to find my confidence without dieting, without having to change my body, until you do that, you're not going to attract, I believe, you're not going to attract the partner that's going to respect that.
Well, I mean, Adrian wasn't my choice for me when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
The choices I made in my 20s were predators or drunk guys.
Yeah.
Adrian was the choice I made when I was 41.
I know. Can you guys believe that Ange is almost 50? She does not look like
I'm just about to
over
hit
35.
Just about to hit the big 50.
I can't believe it.
You know, like, so yes, I feel grateful and blessed that I was in a place ready for him to come into my life when I met him.
Yeah.
And some of that, yes, is coincidence and luck, but I was ready for the coincidence to occur. And I think prior to that, I just wasn't. Yeah. I couldn't have picked a good guy if he'd came and thrown himself, you know, right at my feet.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So to wrap this up, what would be, and like in a brief sentence or word, what would be your probably 3 top tips to help women who are really struggling with body image and intimacy? What would be your 3 top tips?
My number 1 top tip would be craft a life for yourself that you love living and recognise that your body allows you to experience that life. Get therapy if you need it and find words and language that are grounded in science, and I would suggest looking at someone like Emily Nagoski's work or Esther Perel's work, because her angle is a little bit different on things, or any of the Gottman Institute research on relationships and sex, and you will find good language around how to talk about this and give expression to your own experience. And I guess if I could sneak in one more, it would be to just do a gentle evaluation of people in your life who support the direction that you want to go in, and actively work on bringing them closer and be careful about who you let in, who doesn't.
Yeah, I love that. That's good. I think my top 3, I'll probably be a bit more candid and rough on this. 1, work on yourself 100%, to work on your emotions and beliefs and realise that you actually are great as you are. 2, through that, learn your boundaries and don't put up with shit. And 3, be vulnerable with someone and open up, knowing that you cannot say the wrong thing to the right person.
Beautiful.
That'd be it.
Cool. Great words of advice.
So stay tuned, guys, because our next conversation, we're going to be kind of piggybacking onto this about the effects of pornography on body image. We could have spoken about that within this as well. It is a juicy topic. It is one that people don't want to talk about, but a lot of people need to hear. And I know a lot of you have been affected by this, myself too. So stay around for the next episode, and we cannot wait to be back with you soon. Thank you, Ange, for jumping on here today.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.